All right, this is Group 11, Discussion 6. My name's John.
I'm Megan.
Noel?
I'm Xinhu.
And I'm Jennifer.
And Leanne is with us in spirit. And today we're going to be talking about leadership in times of crisis and things of that nature. So, guys, let's start the discussion by talking about the BP oil spill. Obviously, when it happened, it came out that they had been warned that
Wait, hold up.
the oil rig.
Jennifer's not with us.
I'm coming.
Oh, she's here. Can you still hear us,
Okay.
Jennifer?
Hold on. Yeah.
The camera is.
I can hear. I'll turn my camera on in just a second. I'm sorry. It turned off on me because my battery went into low power mode. So
that's
continue.
okay.
I can hear.
That's
No,
okay.
we'll keep it rolling. He'll join us momentarily. So basically, there had been warnings given to BP, and they kind of just ignored them and didn't, I guess, took for granted what people were trying to tell them, that it was like a disaster waiting to happen. And I think the I can't remember the words exactly, but there was a good mention of someone described someone described it. Anyway, I'll find that while we're talking. But um, anyway, so we can talk about how they just kind of tried to avoid the situation altogether, and then it blew up in their face, and then they had a huge crisis on their hands. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's any company, regardless of the situation, you would think would take warnings like that seriously, especially when it's involving something as big as that. Um, but since they didn't, they had the crisis on their hands, and then they had their fair share of problems afterwards, trying to avoid responsibility and avoid accountability and everything. So what do you guys think? What do you think they could have done better in this situation?
I think they could have, do inspections better and actually pay attention to what the employees were saying instead of saying, oh, whatever, just kind of push it aside.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's called
Yeah.
like issue selling. It's talking about in the pre-crisis, and it's just talking about how like middle managers in particular need to convince the higher executives the importance of an issue, and they have to persuade them on that. And then obviously, whoever recognized the problem didn't do that to the best of their ability because they just ignored that. So that's probably where the first issue started.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they should have been more accountable, especially when dealing with like human lives. I mean, many people were killed during it too.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, it's crazy to think that you'd think they would understand the um, how severe the
Hmm.
implications were if they're just going to ignore something like that. But I did find what I had read earlier, and not only had they been warned, but they had been fined for safety violations even before the spill. So, I mean, warnings should be taken seriously enough, but if you're fined for it, you think that would immediately cause them to, fix what's going on. And then some engineer who had observed what was going on the drilling platform where the accident occurred um, described it as a nightmare well, and before the fire and explosion. So even he knew that it was just an accident waiting to happen, and a huge accident waiting to happen, because just everyone that was impacted, from the people who were there on the drilling platform, from the people who live along the coast. Um, there's industries involved, people who go out and, I don't know what the term would be, but you get like the fish out of the water and stuff and sell it.
Yeah.
Fishing industry.
So it
So it's just a lot of implications there, and for them to just ignore it, it just shows a lot of irresponsibility on their part.
definitely
Yeah.
could have prevented.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Also, marine animals actually, died or had mutations from that oil spill alone. Even though it's happened a long time ago, there's still complications today. That's why the plant is shut down, because they failed to contain it, even though after several attempts already. So it's been shut down. It's been put away. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they should have had a better plan to deal with if something like that ever did happen. But clearly they weren't prepared because when it happened, they were kind of like, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And then
Right.
just the way they handled it, like avoiding that responsibility and kind of, like you said, trying to push it on the other guy, just wasn't really taking full responsibility for the whole situation, the gravity of the situation. I feel like they were just trying to like undermine.
Right. Yeah, because like you said, with them just kind of fighting with the operators of the platform, trying to put the
Yeah.
blame on them, and the other side doing the same to them. It's like that's getting you nowhere. And
Mhm.
clearly, they didn't even have any idea really of how to go about fixing the situation after that.
Yeah.
Because the book says that they were more interested in avoiding that responsibility and avoiding all the blame than in helping victims and the people who were affected by the disaster. So yeah, clearly they didn't have it figured out
Yeah.
or even close to figured out. So
It really like makes you question the integrity of the company as a whole and the leaders, and just um they should have just saw they should have just taken responsibility for what they did, and started trying to create a better image for their company from that point, like donating tons of
yeah,
money to the animals to help clean them up in the ocean and stuff like that, which I don't
right.
know if they did or not, but it doesn't sound like they did.
Yeah, let's hope eventually they. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the one good thing when something like that happens. It's like there's such a public outcry,
Yeah.
and everyone hates BP. Even to this day, there's people who hate BP, and it's been how many years? So that's the good thing is that oftentimes they're forced into at least making a plan for the next crisis and trying to better their image by doing things like you said, helping wildlife and stuff like that, and helping preparedness. So that's the only good thing to come out of it, I guess you could say. Hopefully, they'll be better prepared in the future if it ever happens again.
True. Learning
But
from their mistakes.
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so yeah, what I guess in talking about what they did wrong, I guess we could talk about Jennifer. You had mentioned, I think before we started the discussion, um, the what was it, the like aspects of decision making after the crisis happens, I think you said.
I mean, there's a whole lot of things you could do, like the pre-crisis, like what you acknowledging that something's might go wrong, and then the ways that you should handle that problem, and then during the event, and then after the event. It's just there's just so many different aspects that they should have taken, and I mean, anyone can take. So it's like for the BP oil spill, it should have been like pre-crisis is the issue selling. So the middle managers or whoever noticed it should have been informing the executives of the importance of this, and then during the crisis they should have been communicating more effectively, which I feel like instead they were just trying to save face. And then after, they were avoiding the responsibility. So it's like they kind of did every single thing you weren't supposed to do, except that was like listed in the text.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, the textbook suggested that a company should always have a crisis management team who,
Yeah.
outlines what they need to do and look for signs of trouble so that if, they see those signs early on, then maybe they can work to rectify it. And like, the BP spill, there were signs, but management was like, no, it's not important enough. So that's why the accident happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even the text says that leaders should act as crisis managers, which I feel like in this situation they were worried about money more than anything.
Yeah, not saving lives.
So I actually just thought of like a work example to talk about. Like, I mean, it was kind of a crisis, but it would have affected someone's health and the look of their face, since I work at a medical spa, so they do like Botox and fillers and stuff like that. So some lady came in and she had gotten Botox injections in her forehead and stuff, and then probably like a week or two after, she called up my boss, so hence leader, and was saying that she had these like itchy rashes all over her forehead and stuff like that. And the way I saw her handle it was exactly how they're saying pre-crisis should be. So she communicated super effectively, and she was sense making. So she was like, well, you've gotten Botox before, how did you get this rash, and why are you itchy, like did you all of a sudden develop an allergic reaction to it or something. And so she immediately called her, had her come in to look at her, make sure everything was okay. And so she communicated effectively, and then after, she's continued to follow up with her. And it turned out the lady actually had shingles, but
Oh God.
but I thought of the example because the way she handles it, if anyone ever has a slight problem with them, they're like, oh, this didn't kick in, or oh, I have like a bump or a lump or something. She does all of the protocols that the book lists, as in like making sense of the situation, trying to reason, and then, I mean, she doesn't really have to sell the importance of it because she knows the importance of it. She's the leader, and then she took that initiative to, communicate effectively and not try to hide from her mistake or anything like that, and have them come in and back up her work. So
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny. Like we're kids basically in a class, and we have a textbook that tells us what steps we should take if we're ever in this situation. And like huge companies can't even take these steps themselves. You should always have a protocol. And you work for like a smaller business, right? And they have their protocol laid out, and so if anything
we
like
have
that
4
happens,
employees.
right? Then it sounds like she's got it, perfect. So if it ever
Yeah.
happens, she knows exactly what to do, and
Yeah.
so it never really gets to that crisis stage. But if
Exactly.
she did, she at least had a plan. And then like these huge companies just don't, or they just don't care enough to, and maybe they just don't understand how much
They
it'll
just want to.
impact them.
I feel like what BP was trying to do is just like cut corners and like try to ignore it and be like, oh, nothing's gonna happen. Like they just didn't want to invest and spend the money. Whereas like,
Right.
for example, like where I work, she carries like every backup plan you could imagine. She carries 2 EpiPens just in case someone has an allergic reaction. She carries a liquid that dissolves filler and stuff like that to get it out of their system. Like she has every backup plan known to man. So it is interesting, that dynamic of
Right.
the bigger companies and smaller.
Because I mean, think how much. I understand they were trying to save money and cut corners initially, but think how much money it would have saved them if they had prevented this disaster from happening. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just in probably their stock prices dropping so much alone, not to mention all the money they had to spend in, relief and everything afterwards. And it's just crazy that they wouldn't have a backup plan and a protocol. But
Yeah, exactly.
I think the best
Yeah.
example of a crisis management would be in Japan. Remember when the hurricane hit Japan? Not the hurricane, the tsunami hit, and everyone was in disarray. But a day after, the government actually, had a food truck. Everyone was unified and just, get in a single file line and, to grab food. And the government was able to rebuild it quickly enough because everyone was, together and worked towards one single goal. And even the government actually, stand in front of the crowd and kind of like say, oh, we're sorry that's happened. It's not our fault, but still we should have been prepared for this. And so they actually apologized. And that's what the book suggested. If in case of crisis, whether your fault or not, just apologize so that people can, understand where you're coming from.
Mm.
yeah, because I mean, no one wants to see a company like trying to avoid the blame and everything. It just angers them even more. So if you apologize, like you said, even if you don't necessarily think it's completely your fault, it looks a lot worse if you don't apologize. So yeah, I think that
Yeah.
was a great example. Does anyone else have anything to say, or you guys want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I agree with Noel that, and I think when the organization face to the any problem, the leader is very important. Apologize,
Yeah,
because the leadership sets a good example. And what Jennifer says, pre-criticize and the criticize event and the post-criticize in the chapter. When any organization face to and meets any kind of the criticize the leader is very important as the first time. Yeah.